Hello everyone. In my previous video, I had discussed the basic aspect of evolution and natural selection. There we studied that natural selection is a process that actually leads to flourishing of the fittest individual, that is better known as survival of the fittest. This video will contain the forms of selection that leads to natural selection. It is a statistical concept and we shall be learning this by various graphs. Selection is a statistical concept. So you cannot predict the fate of a single individual, because whenever we are dealing with selection, we are dealing with a population group. So you cannot predict actually the fate of any single individual, but because it is a statistical concept, we can definitely predict which type of individual will occur more in a population. So what is this type of individual? Now in a population there are variations. Every individual is different from the other one in certain traits or characters. So these traits or characters may have certain advantages or disadvantages in a population. So based on its advantages and disadvantages, the nature selects those organisms which are fit to survive in the environment. So there are three types of natural selection that have been identified: stabilizing selection, directional selection, and disruptive selection. Stabilizing selection tries to stabilize a population, so it will eliminate the extremes of population. Directional selection, it will eliminate a single extreme phenotype. Disruptive selection will act to eliminate intermediate type. So, because this is a statistical concept, we will be discussing it with graphical representations that has a bell curve. So let us see the graphical representation of the stabilizing selection. So you can see an inverted bell curve here. One you can see in the dotted lines, and another one you can see in the full line bell curve. So the dotted line shows original population and the full line curve shows the population after selection. And then you can see the two arrows that are showing selection against both extremes. So what are the extremes? The curve where it starts is one extreme, and the curve where it ends is the another extreme. In the center, where you have the peak, is the median of the population. Now when selective pressures select against the two extremes of a trait, selective pressures are nothing but the physiological conditions or the environmental conditions of a particular time actually is the selective pressures. These selective pressures are going to select against the two extremes of a trait. Now trait is a character. For example, suppose we are taking three types of plants. One category is too short, the another category of plant is of medium sized, and the third category of plants are long sized plants. Now in an environment where they are planted, the plants which are too shorter will be competing with the medium as well as long sized plants for sunlight. Because it's too short, it may not get the sunlight that it requires. On the other hand, the extremely tall plants may be more susceptible to wind damage. Now you see, it's plants, it's not trees. So if there is a plant, a large sized plant, and if there is wind, so what is going to happen? The plants are going to be uprooted. So the large or the taller plants are at a risk. The smaller plants are at a risk. Why? Because they are not going to get proper sunlight or proper amount of nutrition, because another group of plants are also growing there. Now the third group of plant, that is a medium sized plant, is going to get appropriate sunlight. and it is not very much disturbed by the activity of wind or any other action of the air. So what will happen? The selective pressures are here sunlight, wind, and such other things. So they are not going to affect the medium sized plant as they are affecting the smaller sized as well as the tall sized plants. So in a way, both the extremes, that is the smaller and the taller, are not going to survive for long, whereas the medium sized plants will be surviving, and this is what is fit to be in that environment. So this kind of selection process in natural selection will be referred to as stabilizing selection. This is a graphical representation that depicts directional selection. In directional selection, as I've told you earlier, one extreme of the trait distribution experiences selection against it. One extreme of the trait. So what will happen? The result is the population's trait distribution shift towards the other extreme. So as you can see in the graph, the original population and populations after selection shows a shift towards the other extreme. The other extreme here is the right hand side of the curve. Now in the case of such selection, the mean of the population graph shifts. So the mean is shifting. Let us take the familiar example of giraffe necks. You must have studied the Lamarck's theory of the giraffe neck. So Lamarck says it's use and disuse, but Charles Darwin says it's not use and disuse of the organ, but actually those are the beneficial genes that are being promoted in a population of giraffes, where the smaller neck size of the giraffes are eliminated and giraffes with longer necks are promoted in the environment. So here there will be mainly two groups: giraffes with short necks and giraffes with longer necks. So what is the selective pressure here? Length of the neck. Because at that time they didn't have grasslands and they had higher trees from where they could get their food. So it was important for these giraffes to raise their heads high so that they could take up the leaves of the trees and the plants. So there will be two extremes, one with short necks and one with longer necks. Now suppose even if there is a middle-aged neck giraffe, still it's not having anything in its favor. The smaller sized or the small neck animal are not able to reach the food that they want, so they will be perishing. But the longer neck giraffes are going to feed themselves and satisfy their hunger, so they will be selected. So this selection is called directional. That means in a direction, not the short or the medium, but in a direction always the longer necks will be promoted by the environment. So this is taking place in a particular direction. So the curve will always shift towards the right hand side. The third form of selection is a disruptive selection. Disruptive means something that gets disrupted, something that gets disturbed in between. So this is a selection where the selection pressures act against individuals in the middle of the trait distribution. So you can see there's a graph, it will go up, then it will go down, then again it will go up and come down. So there will be two medians here. But the selection against the mean, that is the original population, will be having single median at the center. The result is a bimodal or two-peaked curve in which the two extremes of the curves create their own smaller curves. Now, we'll be taking an example to understand properly this disruptive selection. So this is an example of disruptive selection. Let us take the example of mouse. As you can see in the image, that we are showing an original population curve where you have mainly two kinds of rats. At one extreme you can see very light brown, and in the next extreme you can see the dark colored mouse. Now the mouse is going to move to a new environment with light brown rock and dark brown volcanic rock. Now why it is going to move? In order to adapt itself to the environment so that it is not getting fed upon by the predators. It will be looking for such environment where it will be protected. So they are going to move to a new environment where there will be light brown rock and brown, that is dark brown volcanic rock. Now the light brown and dark brown mice blend in with the environment. Why? Because there are light brown rock, the light colors mouse will go and remain there, and the dark brown mice will blend with the dark brown volcanic rock. But what is going to happen to the medium brown mice? They do not have, if they are on light brown rock, they will be captured by the predators because they are darker than the light brown rocks. And if they are on dark brown rock, at that place their color will be lighter than the color of the rock, so the predators can identify them there also. So they will be eaten up by the predators. So what is happening? The light or the dark brown rice will pass on their genes, because that's beneficial genes which is going to promote their living in the nature from generation to generation. And the medium sized rats, that is the rats, who have a medium color, are not going to survive in the environment. As a result, the two extremes will be surviving, but the median population is not going to survive. This is what is disruptive selection, where the two extremes are getting favored, but the median individuals are not going to be selected by the organism. Hence, this is what is the basic theory of natural selection. In order to give a summary or recapitulate what we have studied, let me remind you that Darwin's concept of natural selection was based on several key observations. The traits are heritable, more offsprings are produced than can survive, and offsprings vary in their heritable traits. Based on these simple observations, Darwin concluded that in a population, some individuals will have inherited traits that help them survive and reproduce. The individuals with the good traits will leave more offspring in the next generation. Because the good traits are heritable, and because organisms with these traits leave more offspring, the traits will tend to become more common in the next generation. Over generations, the populations will become adapted to its environment. As individuals with traits helpful in that environment have consistently greater reproductive success than their peers or other group members. So Darwin's model of evolution by natural selection allowed him to explain the patterns he had seen during his travel. So all of you are aware of the Galapagos finches. So he saw the Galapagos finches while he was visiting the forest of South America. He saw that if the Galapagos finch species shared a common ancestor, it made sense that they should broadly resemble one another. But it was not so. He could see the difference in the sizes and shapes of the beaks of those finches for using different food sources. These factors could have led to the formation of distinct species on each land, and they survive because they are selected naturally. The selective pressures, the environment around, prefers those individuals who can sustain or adapt themselves in a better way in a particular area. And this is the reason natural selection is the keystone for sustaining life on this earth. So I hope this presentation, natural selection and its type, will be a great help for you for studying. Any doubts or any problems related to this context, you can share with me, and likely I would be clarifying all your doubts and problems. Thank you so much. Stay safe and study well. Thank you, girls.